Hi everyone, Tom Arnold here, and we have a very special interview for you guys today. We're joined by Alec Faulkner of Yacht Club Games to talk about the recently announced Mina the Hollower, and I'm also joined by Tris Valbuena, which hopefully I said correctly.
Yes.
And we're going to get into details about that, and maybe about its Kickstarter, working at Yacht Club Games, and making the game in general, and maybe some of the great influences that the game had. So starting off, Alec, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. I'm really excited to talk about the game.
It must be nice after not being able to talk about the game for maybe 2 years.
Yeah, yep. I mean, I've been able to talk to my friends about it, and they all think it's really neat, but there's a whole world of difference between that and seeing just everybody in the entire world all at once celebrating Mina. It's truly surreal.
Yeah, it must be a great feeling. Just real quick for our audience, would you please explain what you do at Yacht Club Games?
Sure. So I'm a designer at Yacht Club Games, and I'm the director of Mina the Hollower. We're a pretty small company, so that means that we all wear a lot of hats. What that means for me is that most of the time I'm designing new enemies or new bosses or features for the game or putting the level design together, but sometimes, we gotta write the story or promote the game like we're doing now, or work on music or sound effects or any number of things. So I'm not really sure what I do. It changes every day, it seems like.
Whatever's needed, I guess. So I guess real quick, what was it like working on a new IP after many years of Shovel Knight, and maybe especially with a lot of it taking place during a pandemic?
So to the first part of that question, doing a new IP, that's been really creatively liberating and fun. As much as we love the Shovel Knight universe and are excited to make more games in it, I mean, we've been working in that sandbox for 8 years now or so, it felt like everybody deserved a little bit of a break from that. And I think we're all having a lot of fun imagining what types of stuff that we could do in the world of Mina the Hollower that maybe would be more off limits than Shovel Knight. We're striving for a little bit of a darker tone. We're doing a few things a little bit differently. As far as working in a pandemic, man, it's been rough. It's been rough.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people picking up on the more obvious limitations that come with that, right? It's working remotely is a little hard, scheduling meetings is harder, communicating to people without body language is going to slow things down. All of those things slow down the development of a game, but I haven't seen a lot of people talk about just the creative toll that it takes on people, right? We're living through a potentially extremely traumatic period of time, and so mustering the energy to work on anything, I think, is a miracle.
Yeah, well, you've done a great job of the demo so far, but yeah, I would guess you'd miss out things like water cooler idea moments and stuff like that. So.
Totally. We have to force ourselves to try and recreate those kinds of environments because they're a lot harder to have naturally appear, right? We have to kind of force ourselves to be okay, everyone, get on Discord and we're all gonna hang out and have fun. Just like we used to.
That super serious person. We're gonna be there. We're gonna have
it's
fun.
Important. It's important to our process. We need to hang out and have fun.
I guess this is something I noticed yesterday, which I think I remembered at the time being thinking about it as Propeller Rat, but in the Yacht Club Presents in 2020, 2 games were mentioned to be on the way, and you said, "These brand new games are a ways off, but please begin to imagine what kind of games we'll be crafting during 2020, the year of the rat." How much of the game did you know at that point, and how much has Mina the Hollower changed since?
Well, it's the same project, obviously. There's no secret other rat game. But at that point, we weren't sure what the name of the game was, but we had a good sense of what the character would be and like what the core gameplay would be and what sort of game that we're trying to make. All of that was pretty well known at that point. But the more specifics about, you know, her design and the world were still more nebulous, I would say.
That raises the question then of, was Mina always a mouse, or was that tease implying maybe she was originally a rat or some other animal even?
Mouse, rat, what's the difference? No, she was always going to be a mouse, but it's not the year of the mouse in the Chinese New Year, is it? It's the
That's
year of the
true.
rat. So, I don't know, close enough. It also kind of threw people off the scent. Everyone started thinking about propeller rats just constantly.
That's what I thought.
That's exactly what Tom thought, yeah.
I thought that was delightful. I loved that.
I guess that does raise the question though. Why did you guys settle on a mouse for Mina's design?
So, at the beginning, when I was just kind of like playing with ideas, not very seriously, before I was even like pitching the stuff to the company at large, I was thinking, you know, it sure would be neat if there was a Castlevania type game, just like 1 or 2 or 3, from like a top-down perspective, right? And so I was just doodling a lot, and I started with like, you know, a Simon Belmonte kind of looking character, but I was like, I don't want to do that. And so my partner at the time, she was looking at everything, and one of the characters that I was drawing stood out to her. She's like, that one's cute, and I was like, all right, I'll like animate this one, and it turned into what is now Mina. But along the way, I think we found a lot of really, really compelling reasons to iterate on that initial idea. Like, you know, those big ears, similar to Shovel Knight, give her like a very interesting and recognizable silhouette from a distance that allows you to identify her position on screen more easily. You know, we thought like, well, we have like a blue man human character in armor. So like, just for the sake of having a cool and diverse and interesting lineup of franchises, how about a red woman animal wearing not armor? This process of elimination.
It's a completely different end of a creative spectrum.
Right. But that also, you know, the more we worked on it, the more cool stuff that we ended up liking about that character design. Like her cloak and her robes, like, and her tail give a lot of built-in secondary motion to any action that you have, which has a nice contrast to Shovel Knight's more like clunky and kind of way of being. So yeah, the more we kept working on it, the more we liked it. And now it seems crazy to think it could be anything else.
At what point, though, like, so Mina likes to dig. What point did the digging idea come up and burrowing? Like, what kind of sparked that inspiration for that?
So I knew that we wanted the ability to have lots of fun, cool platforming sections in the game. Obviously, there's a higher focus on combat this time around. There's more focus on exploration and keeping like the world of the game in your head and knowing where to go. All of those things are more important, but like platforming, I think, is just so core to what we do that I don't know how to make a game without that sort of stuff, I guess. So I knew that this character ought to be able to like jump over pits and stuff, but using a jump for combat didn't make a lot of sense. I was finding it hard to tell like where exactly the character is in 3D space when you're jumping over an enemy and your sprite's up here and your shadow's down here. Like just identifying all of that on the screen was proving to be pretty difficult. And so it was like, well, what if instead of jumping over the guys, you could jump under them? That way it's like much more binary and it's a lot easier to see like, oh, I'm burrowed, so therefore I am invulnerable at this moment, as opposed to I think I'm high enough not to get hit by this attack. At no point did I realize, oh, this is another game about digging. That just, I guess it just happened.
Well, it pushes it further, at least, I feel, than Shovel Knight's digging. So
Yeah, at this point, I feel like we have to like commit to this, right? Whatever our next franchise is, like, I guess it's got to be about digging in some kind of way. We can add it to our dirt suite of titles.
Staying grounded. That brings us to a quick one. With so Shovel Knight also likes to dig. Have you thought about mixing their worlds briefly with a cameo? I mean, Shovel Knight is in a lot of cameos.
I mean, we definitely thought about it, but it seems like everyone on the team pretty overwhelmingly was like, we should stretch our muscles and try not to do that. People have been asking us to tackle a new IP for a while, and us ourselves, right, making all of those Shovel Knight expansions one after another. I think we all wanted a little bit of a break from that kind of thing. So right now the goal is to have no connecting threads whatsoever between the two universes, and we'll see how long that lasts.
So, between the reveal of the game and things that we've learned about it since, you guys have mentioned Castlevania and Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening and even Bloodborne as references. How did those three come to be what were the main influences that get talked about for this? And I guess related to that, is Link's Awakening the only Zelda game influence? Or are there more Zelda influences than just that one?
Oh, there's plenty of Zelda in there. I mean, it doesn't take very keen eye to notice that the leveling up system, when you bone up, is very much inspired by Zelda 2. I think when it comes to choosing those inspirations, a lot of what we do is we look at what kinds of games from the past we feel are pretty underappreciated. Shovel Knight ostensibly is kind of a game intended to make people love Zelda 2. And so when we're making a new franchise, a lot of what we're thinking is like, what other types of gameplay have kind of gone by the wayside without being explored more for no good reason, right? There's a lot of top-down games, but there's not really a lot of top-down action-adventure games in a similar vein to classic top-down 2D Zelda. There's some more like arcadey stuff, right? There's like Pocky and Rocky. There's always Star Tropics, right? But like, you would think, right, there would be way, way, way more of them, right? How many Mario clones got made over the last like 30 years, right? Thousands and thousands of platformers. But how many people are like actually trying to tackle like a cool new Zelda world? It's surprisingly few. So that was really interesting to us as a challenge. As far as the Castlevania stuff goes, I think it's something similar, right? There's plenty of Castlevanias that try to capture the fun of Symphony of the Night and onwards, right? That I think that territory is very well explored, especially right now. But I never see people celebrating the unique quirks of Castlevania 1 or 3, and let's not talk about 2. Like those games with the really simple controls, but like still very deliberate spacing and very deliberate combat, tough as nails platforming, that feeling of like, man, you're going across the bridge and the knight's throwing axes at you high and low, but also the birds coming down, and you know what you need to do, and the controls are there to do it, but you need to be very specific about it all. That type of gameplay was really, really interesting to us, and so making a game that can not only iterate on that and make a cooler new game out of those kinds of base ideas, but also hopefully direct people towards those classics is important to us. And then as far as Bloodborne goes, I think what we've kind of been finding along the way is that when you take that kind of combat from classic Castlevania, where you need to be really deliberate about everything and there's intentional long wind up on some of your attacks, and then you marry that with like the top-down, more open-ended exploration of a Zelda game, you kind of get a weird 2D version of a Souls game in some kind of way. So all of those inspirations are kind of floating around in our heads right now to make something totally new and weird and different.
It makes a lot of sense when you put it that way. It really does. It really comes together in a way that just hearing it sounds interesting. But from what we've seen of it so far, it just looks great already.
Yeah, hopefully it's a game that we feel like we are really qualified to make, which I think is true, but also a game that nobody else is really making anymore. Hopefully we can hit that sweet spot for everybody.
Makes sense.
Yeah, when I saw it, it's like, why hasn't anybody done this before with Castlevania on a top-down Zelda-like style? Like, it just seems to make perfect sense. And I was thinking about the, kind of Souls games with the wind-up time needed to do a burrow. It's like, you can't just be like, oh, there's an enemy nearby, I'm gonna hop down and hide. Like, I would get hit if I was trying to play that way at first. So that was kind of neat to see. And so Castlevania 2, I'm glad you kind of mentioned it, because I was thinking, before the Yacht Club kind of said, you should be playing Zelda 2. And I'm like, am I supposed to be playing Castlevania 2 now? Because I kind of just played that for a bit and I don't like this. But no, it sounds like that is not the case.
I think Castlevania 2 is a little harder to recommend. If you want to try playing it, definitely use a walkthrough. Maybe get one of those mods, or ROM hacks, Simon's Quest Redacted, right? Speed up that transition, put the hints like in actual English that you can read as opposed to whatever they were before. It's a little rougher around the edges, but I think there is a lot of fun in Castlevania 2.
Oh, we had a fan question kind of from follow-up to that from Akko. They said, considering how massive Shovel Knight was in IP crossover-wise, would you be as willing with Mina to have Mina to cross over into other indie games? And also, what's your favorite Castlevania game?
So we haven't really had an opportunity to think about that. Just yesterday, like last night I was talking to Sean, another designer at Yacht Club, about this kind of thing. It was like, what are we going to do with cameos? Should we like open the floodgates again? Should we do it differently? I don't know. So we'll see. I guess when the first cameo request comes in, we'll have to think about that. But who knows? It sure is neat that Shovel Knight was in so many games.
What is your favorite Castlevania game?
Oh, right. It's got to be Castlevania 3. I mean, 1 I think is really, really, really cool, but there's only like 6 stages, and around stage 5 or 6 it maybe gets a little bit too hard for most people. 2 is a weird experiment. Let's gloss over that one. 3, though, I really, really love Castlevania 3. Giving people different players or different characters that they can play as, I think, adds a lot in order to make it a game that people can actually get through. If you're struggling with one section as Simon, then like maybe another playstyle might jive with you more. The slightly more open-ended level structure, I think, is a lot of fun. I love playing that game over and over again because I can take a slightly different route each time. But most importantly, just like the level design is out of this world. It's just a really, really solid action game to go through, and I can't help but do it pretty much once every Halloween. Wow. Close second, Rondo of Blood. I love that game as well. For many, many similar reasons.
I'll go back to one of the Zelda ones that we have here, because we have a couple of them. I guess, is there any more you could tell us about the Zelda influence? Like, are there going to be more Zelda-like puzzles or even side quests, for example?
Right. As far as puzzles go, we're very intentionally trying to avoid taking that element of Zelda, incorporating it into the game. When I think about Zelda, I think of it as a union between like an action game and a puzzle game. I know that we can do the action part really, really, really well. I'm extremely confident in that. I think we could do the puzzle game well also, but doing both of them at once doesn't seem like something that we were really interested in. When you structure the game like that, you end up with inevitable situations where players are going to get stuck, right? It's like, I killed all the enemies, but I don't know where the key is, or I don't know where to go now. And so we're trying to avoid making a game where people can kind of get stuck in those situations, and are intending more to make it like, I know what I want to be doing, I know where I need to be going, but the challenge isn't actually getting there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. And you're not making a straight-up Zelda-like game. It's only one of the inspirations. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think I said it in your guys' chat yesterday, but it'll be a little bit more like seasons than ages.
Yeah,
which you guys
that makes perfect sense. On a similar question about these Game Boy Zeldas, Link's Awakening back in the day, not the Switch one, came in both like black and white or the Game Boy colors and the color version. Do you guys think you'll have any sort of like color filters to emulate the Game Boy look?
Maybe. It's a little harder than a filter because if you're doing it correctly, you're taking the vast array of color on the color version and you're condensing it into only 4 shades, right?
Right.
And when a character is shaded with like a red and a blue that are approximately the same brightness, do you make both of those the same green? Now I can't tell if it was red or if it was blue. An artist would have to, if we wanted to really do it right, go in and essentially make the pea green original Game Boy version of the game and the color DX version, right?
I see, yeah.
Having said all that, I mean, that sounds awesome. Maybe we'll do it. I'm not sure. I'm not sure quite yet.
Okay.
Speaking of the different palettes and stuff, though, why Game Boy Color instead of, let's say, Game Boy or Game Boy Advance?
Game Boy Advance, at that point, I feel like there's not much of a distinction between that and like a Super Nintendo game. And I feel like a lot of games, especially indie games that come out, are capturing that aesthetic like really, really well.
Right.
We already did NES, right? And so we kind of didn't really want to do that just again. That color palette especially, we are really sick of. There's too many greens and too many blues. It's very annoying to work with. So we wanted to do something new that hopefully people haven't really seen before, and I think we're doing that. There aren't really a lot of games that are capturing the specific coolness of the Game Boy Color, and hopefully we can take that.
No, hopefully it inspires more games down the lines to do that. Now, how do you draw the line between staying faithful to the hardware, like with your color palette, for instance, but then adding modern flourishes like parallax scrolling?
We have a lot of experience having these kinds of discussions internally with all those Shovel Knight games, right? We've kind of been down that road before, so we know that some things just make a lot of sense. Like, we should make the game in color. It's going to be a lot harder to sell like a black and white game to people, and people are going to want color. It's going to make the game better. We need to make the game widescreen, right? It would be cool if it was 10:9 like the original Game Boy, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, I love that aspect ratio, but 99.9999% of TVs that it's going to be played on look like that, and they're widescreen.
Yeah.
So certain big decisions like that, I feel like there isn't even really room for us to consider an alternative. But when it comes to like the more nitty gritty, right, like how many frames of animation should this attack have for it to be truly authentic? How many like colors are allowed to be in the sprite? We're trying, I think, a little bit more intentionally even than Shovel Knight to make it more accurate. Certain things like parallax scrolling on the NES were like really, really specifically hard to do, but on Game Boy you saw it a little bit more frequently, especially Game Boy Color. So we're enabling ourselves to use a lot of those tricks more liberally while still kind of being faithful to the hardware. But we break it all the time where we need to. Ultimately, the game should like look and feel as cool as it can be, and we're not going to let an artificial limitation get in the way of that. Instead, we always search for solutions that utilize those limitations to make something even cooler.
That's a good answer. I guess we had some people like Odust on Twitter say, why are you making a Game Boy Color style game not for the Game Boy Color? I think that kind of answers it, but I guess people are wishing like a physical reward of a playable Mina the Hollower on Game Boy Color.
I mean, it would just be, we would have to completely redesign the entire game from the ground up. I mean,
Oh boy.
currently it uses like more buttons than the Game Boy technically has, and also just programming wise, right? We make it as a modern game using modern tools, and so to actually create it in assembly is just like a completely different world.
Yeah.
I remember reading that like Zelda 1, the way their map data is laid out is that like the entire world of the game is split into columns that are just assembled, right? Imagine like wall tile, space, space, block, space, space, enemy, space, wall. That's like how they assemble that game, right? And we don't want to make a game like that. I want to be able to design it however we want. And those kinds of limitations I don't think would be useful. And then what do we even do, right? Package it up in like an emulator and sell it to people? It seems, I don't know, seems pretty not feasible for us.
Yeah, I mean, limited audience. I think they're another one asking for like a limited run game or something where it's like actually put on a cartridge, but that's basically making 2 games at that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of incredible hobbyist people out there that could maybe pull that off, but I don't think we have those people at the Yacht Club. With the Analog Pocket now out and their partnership with GB Studio, right? A lot of new actual real Game Boy games should be coming out kind of soon. I'm excited for that.
Do you have Analog Pocket?
No.
Okay, you're in my boat. It's always getting rubbed into me. It's like, look at how amazing this is. I'm like, yes, I know.
I could have pre-ordered one, and I didn't, and it's too late now. I thought about it, and I was like, no, it's like 2 years away at this point. They're so back-ordered. I got really into just my normal Game Boy Color. I installed like a backlight mod for it installed.
Oh, nice.
And I'm like, all right, I'm good now. I don't need that thing anyways.
Since I know you used to be a level designer, so how would you say the level design has changed in Mina compared to Shovel Knight? Beyond specifically it now being completely different perspective,
Right.
would you say it's more challenging?
I'd say it's definitely more challenging,
Okay.
but it always kind of is in the earlier stages of a project. Usually, like, as you make the game, at least for us, you learn more about what it actually looks like. It feels like you're, like, sculpting something big, right? Sometimes you have to zoom in really far and focus on these details, and then you zoom out and you look at the sculpture as a whole, right? And so towards the end of it, you know what it looks like, and you know where the problem areas are, and you know what parts to like polish up, and you know what the level design should be. But earlier on, that's all a little bit more nebulous, and it can kind of get pulled in different directions. So just on that alone, right, it's much harder right now. I could bang out a Shovel Knight level in minutes, but this requires like a lot more thinking. And on top of that, we are doing a lot of new stuff with the level design specifically, right? Things like instant death spikes and pits aren't really a tool that we can rely on anymore to provide tension when the game needs it, right? Right before a boss, or right before a scary mini boss, or the next checkpoint, right? We can't up the ante in that kind of way. We need to find other ways to do it. Yeah, stuff like that is all passing through my brain.
I'll just say quickly, I felt like the demo was set up like the start of a game to slowly teach things in a tutorial type style without tutorials. Is that at the very beginning of the game, or is that a little bit into the game?
So in the demo that you guys played, that was kind of crafted to be a demo. That sort of overworldy area and then the crypt proper that you go into are definitely intended to be in the final game. I'm sure they'll change a ton, but that's how it goes. But we put that cave in there right at the start just to like familiarize people with the more basic controls rather than throwing people literally into the middle of the game. So I don't know the fate of that cave, but it's likely it'll be shuffled to the side when you play the real game.
Okay.
But ultimately, yeah, we do want to make a game where, you know, it teaches you by playing it, and we don't beat you over the head with heavy-handed tutorials. The coolest way that a game can start is with you actually playing the game rather than reading a bunch of stuff. So we're always going to strive to do that.
But I love cutscenes. No.
You're talking to the wrong game developer.
Yeah, no. I appreciated the NES style intro, like from Ninja Gaiden or like Cyber Shadow had. I appreciated that. But then like just quick ones after that.
Right. I mean, we looked at Game Boy in Game Boy Color games a lot, and in addition to just like making one in that sort of framework, much like Shovel Knight, we're interested in tickling that little nostalgia part of your brain every so often. Things like elaborate opening intros were starting to become more common in that era on that system, and hopefully we made something that can go into that pantheon. But little things like that we're always kind of interested in. I'm thinking about like, so many of those cartridges had like real-time clock support. What if we had like real-time clock mechanics somewhere in the game in some cool part? That would be neat. What if there was something you could like trade from your like Game Boy to somebody else's, right? Wouldn't that be neat? I don't know if or how any of those would actually come to fruition, but doing those types of things is half of the fun, I think, of making a game in sort of the Game Boy Color era. Maybe we'll have like the real-time clock tower, and you go there and you have to boot up the game at a certain time or something to access it. That seems like something they would do back then.
Detecting the amount of sunlight from the Nintendo Switch IR cameras.
Right, man. I love stuff like that so much. I wish we could make like some kind of dumb hardware to bundle in the game. That feels like it would be appropriate.
So earlier on, you had mentioned that part of this started with Mina the Mouse's kind of a bunch of designs that she made, and you kind of had it picked from there. But when the idea for Mina the Hollower first came about, was it the mouse that came first, or the burrowing mechanic that came first? Were any other animals also considered beyond the mouse?
I think once the mouse was there, that sort of opened the doors to like what kind of mechanics might you expect. And yeah, it just seemed to fit with that animal specifically. I suppose it could have turned into a human after that, but that might be a little strange to see that digging through the ground at a million miles an hour.
Digging doesn't happen too often in games. I guess it's a game, anything can happen, but yeah, a person like a gardener going through that'd be a bit hard.
It seems better when the mechanics and the characters align with another in a sensical way.
We had one that was quick. It was always considered as top-down, or at one point, did you consider like a 2D side-scrolling for it?
From the get-go, I think it was like, we want to make a top-down game. We've, we made a side-scroller with Shovel Knight, but I also feel like we made so many different types of side-scroller with all the different campaigns. Plague Knight is like a crazy, wacky mobility, flying through the air platformer that we've never really seen before. Yeah. Spectre of Torment was like more of a Ninja Gaiden-y kind of platformer, what with all the wall jumping and wall running. King of Cards is like leaning into the Wario stuff a little bit more, but it ended up being something totally different, where it kind of feels like you're dancing while you're playing the game, but bashing into stuff and spinning. And then we made like a Smash Bros-esque platform fighter, right? Mm-hmm. So as far as 2D platformers go, I feel like we've already done like so much, and so even the idea of adding like little Link's Awakening-esque 2D platforming sections in this game seems like maybe a little bit of a waste. We should like lean in on it being a top-down game through and through.
I did love those 2D sections, but
they're great. Don't get me wrong.
The trailer, which is on MinaTheHollower.com right now on the Kickstarter page, it shows a ton of elements beyond the demo. How complete, in a ballpark figure, would you say the game is right now?
It's so hard to say that, because the game isn't complete when we like make all the content that we have planned. The game's complete when it's done and good, yeah. Right? So it's always hard to commit to answers like this, and I sure have slipped up in the past promising things. Most of our games end up getting delayed, that's no secret. But I'll tell you where it's at in development right now is that, we have some really solid areas that we feel pretty good about, and we have a lot of ideas for what's going to go into the later areas in the game. But still early days. As far as what you could actually play through start to finish right now, it's maybe like 20-30% is like represented, right?
Yeah.
But we have a lot of stuff planned out, and it's always hard to tell, right? Like how much of the game is like crafting the world and the characters and the story. We have like a lot of work done there already. How much of the game is like figuring out the core mobility and like the mechanics, right? We have like a lot there as well. So yeah, it's coming along. It'll come out.
Yeah,
one
it's
day.
so it's hard to say, and like things can change later on. Like with 10 trinkets in the demo, but then 60 mentioned. Is that kind of a set number you have, or is that going to be a flexible number later on? Trinkets being things that change your ability.
That's a flexible number. If we thought would be better with less, we would take some out. If we thought it'd be better with more, we'd add more. But right now, that just seems like a fun, good number, enough to have like a promise of so much variety that you could actually like change your playstyle by combining them. One thing I'm noticing we haven't done a good job of communicating yet is that like in the demo you have 2 trinket slots, right? But I'm sure as the game goes on, you'll be unlocking more and more. So potentially expect like up to 5 of them active at once, right? And I'm really excited about the ones that will change like the moment-to-moment gameplay. Things that actually allow your character to do more things and have more abilities or break the game in fun ways. I think part of that system and part of its fun should be in like crafting a specific and unique play style that you kind of work with, and also giving the game hopefully a lot of replayability.
On that note, though, we had one question from DuelistTheCoolest.
I love that name.
I want to know if it's a Zelda-style continuous world or if it's level-based like Shovel Knight. Is there backtracking? Now, maybe you can't say, but this is just what this fan was interested in knowing.
So it'll be, I think, more interconnected than people might be anticipating at the moment. The idea is that you will be able to like walk from one area or one dungeon-esque area through, you know, the hub of the game all the way to like somewhere else. Think like, yeah, an interconnected like Zelda or Dark Souls-y kind of world. But having said that, I sure do hate backtracking in games. So we're trying to like design it in such a way where we can minimize all of those elements, and it always feels like it's routing you in a way that's sensical and fun and showing you new content.
Yeah, and I guess also with leveling up, you're going to be way more powerful going back to those areas too.
Yeah, it's a tricky balance because like you need to build trust in the game designer for the player, right? And in a linear game, that's really easy. You can only see and interact with the things that are immediately in front of you. But in a non-linear game, right, we're kind of trusting the player more than they're trusting us, right? You need to figure out where you need to go a little bit more. So that's all very scary for us, and we're trying to make sure that it's all very, very clear, and those elements of like these larger, more open games that we don't like are being minimized, like having to backtrack or grind or any of that kind of thing.
In the demo, there was a sparkly area to the left of the stairwell by the explorer in front of like the crypt entrance outside. Could I get to that there in the demo?
You can, but that's a bit of a super secret. There's a very hidden wall that you can break that will take you there.
You actually mentioned earlier about like the potential of cameos, and you'll cross that bridge when it potentially comes up. But considering you guys spent the last like 8+ years with Shovel Knight and how that turned into such a big IP with several expansions and now even the sequels and spin-offs and such, is there any sort of long-term plan in mind with Mina? Or is that going to solely depend on reception to the game?
There totally is.
Okay.
Like, yeah, I think we're interested in not just making cool games, but in also making them into cool products and larger brands that can hold multiple games. You know, it's no secret we love Nintendo, and we want to just be like a bit of a mini Nintendo. So now that we have very firmly what kind of feels like our Mario, I think we're going to be doing the same sorts of stuff with what hopefully feels like our Zelda.
That's exciting. That is very exciting.
I already have we have a plan that's surprisingly concrete for what a sequel might look like to this game.
Ooh,
we
okay.
we gotta finish this one first.
Well, there's that, and you have the Yacht Club Presents now too, as like Nintendo Directs. So, and you had Shovel Knight Amiibo at one point.
Yeah,
that's true. I'm so glad that we've been able to do 3 of those Yacht Club Games Presents. They're so much fun to do. I hope we can keep making them.
Yeah, I was watching the 2021 again, and like I think it's you and Sean going like, "Good job, good job."
Yeah, we wanted to make sure we get a little bit of that awkward humor in there.
Sometimes that's the best part.
Here is one from SSS333. They say stereoscopic 3D and Shovel Knight on 3DS looked amazing. Will Mina the Hollower have it on any platform? And I'm going to throw in, is it still built in 3D similar to the Shovel Knight engine?
So it is kind of built in the same way. Technically, it would be possible to make a 3D version of the game in the same vein as the 3DS versions of Shovel Knight. However, that's not in the cards, unfortunately. The 3DS has been sunset at this point, and we can't really make a 3DS game. But man, I sure did love that. I really, really believed in like stereoscopic 3D. And I'm not just saying that because I had to implement all of it for so many of those Shovel Knight levels, which is a pain, you know? Nobody, like, 3D gives people headaches sometimes when it's, like, perfect and good and final and they're actually playing it. Imagine you're developing the game, it's all broken, and everything that's going in your left eye is going in your right and vice versa, and you have to work on it while, like, staring at that.
Oh man.
It's not only like, it's like literally it hurts to like work on, but it is so worth it. I feel like the 3D in Shovel Knight on the 3DS like not only gives the world so much more depth, but it also like makes the game more playable by like separating what is the interactable foreground with everything behind it. It like makes it easier to just tell what are platforms and what aren't, and what things are going to hit you and when they're not. And we can like hide so many like fun little secrets and stuff there. Things that you thought maybe were one piece of art in 2D, you can like peer into and like see past it a little bit more in 3D. I really, really believed in that, and I wish that there was like a cool like 3D screen console nowadays, but I understand why there's not. The people spoke, they didn't want it, they didn't like it. VR stuff exists now, right?
Yep.
I guess we could do like the VR version of the game where you're like looking through goggles and you're just looking at the same game, but it's 3D. Maybe if VR gets popular enough, we could think about something like that.
Hopefully, either that or in 20 years we'll have like the analog 3DS Pocket or something.
Oh my god! I want that so badly now.
I might have edited the document. I don't remember if this was one of our questions or from someone specific, but are there any plans for any sort of multiplayer or co-op in any form?
Not at the moment, but I think it would be neat if there was co-op in there. Maybe that'll end up being a stretch goal if the Kickstarter does well enough. Just like the Shovel Knight.
Well, it's definitely been very successful so far, and like congrats to you guys, by the way, for you guys hit your initial goal in like what, less than 12 hours?
Dude. Yeah, I've been really, really blown away by the reception. I guess it makes sense. I guess people like our games, but you really just don't know, right, until you put it out there. We have a tendency, I think, to kind of prepare for the worst and hope for the best. So I'm really blown away right now by all the positive reception.
Yeah, I liked how it was put, though, that you asked for $1 more on Kickstarter, because that's how inflation works, right?
Right.
No, it's it. And as you told me yesterday during the live stream, there are stretch goals now, and I believe you have music and cheat codes already, so that'll be fun. And there's a lot more there, too, to check out. With these stretch goals, though, have you planned in a way so... Like, are they different than Shovel Knight, where there was, like, working on Shovel Knight for years after?
So, we're definitely trying not to do that exact thing again. Toss away your expectations of entire new games being added into this one, I think. Maybe we're done with that. But, you know, making all of those expansions for regular Shovel Knight was a ton of fun, and I definitely don't regret doing it, right? I just wish that we did it in such a way that would allow more eyeballs to actually get put on it. We made all those cool games, but when you release them as free updates, it's hard to kind of get people to care or understand even why they should care, right? I know it's a free update, but like, trust us, it's like a whole new game. People just like don't get it. That's not how DLC normally works. So if we do anything like that again, I think it'll be structured a little bit differently. It'll be more like an actual game that expands on the world, similar to like Silksong, right? I think that's a smarter way of doing things than what we ended up doing.
Oh, well, King of Cards, that felt like if Shovel Knight was like Mario 1, that felt like Mario 3 to me. That was like such a huge jump even, so I love that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny like working on an NES game for that long, right? Because it kind of, you feel the same thing that I think those developers did as they went on, right? Where it's like, well, technically there's no inherent limitations for us. We could break whatever we want. It's like as we went on, it kind of felt like, you know, like new Yacht Club NES games are coming out. Wouldn't they be getting like more advanced as time went on? And so the art, I think, got like a lot more lush, and it just turned into like a way cooler game than I thought it would.
So one thing for me, when I play the demo, it's hard enough not to talk about it for a few days. You mentioned you were kind of able to talk about the game to your friends, but what's it kind of like not being able to talk about it in general? And compared to now, where you can talk about the game so much, and with Kickstarter, you're even opening it up so part of the game development will be seen, like with fly-on-the-wall type tiers, where people can drop in on game development sessions.
I mean, it's just a way more fun way of working on a game, I think, right? Personally, anyways, I really like having that sense of community, but also that pressure, right? I think a motivating thing when working on all those Shovel Knight campaigns was like not wanting to let down all of those backers, right? And so I'm kind of excited about it from that angle as well. The pressure's on now. We gotta really make a good game and deliver. But it's also like just so much fun to be able to work on the game in a way more open environment, you know? Like, hopefully soon we can start like streaming, work on the game and everything. I was showing you guys a little bit earlier, but like, there's all sorts of like fun new ideas over here that I'm super jazzed to hopefully work on, you know, with an audience.
Real quick, kind of mention on the Kickstarter, one of them, one of our fans, Nuke Kibo, says, I would love to know when we're going to expect a release window for the game. It looks awesome, but it's difficult for me to get hyped for it, knowing we have to wait a long time. Now, isn't on Kickstarter the window December 2023 right now?
Right. Much like, you know, a product estimated release date, we have to put something in there, but ultimately the game will come out when it's done. Not able to really provide a more specific window at this time, but I will say that, you know, this year doesn't seem likely.
Yeah, I know it's hard, and I think it's hard for fans to understand too, like how much game development can change later on, and like it's a long process, but I think taking the proper time needed will be the right step in the end. So
yeah, every time we make a game, we kind of just do what we think people will like, try to make the game as good as it can be, and that's the number one priority. So I appreciate everybody for sticking with us and being patient as we work on things.
Okay, so since burrowing is one of like the biggest, if not the main mechanic of the game, are you making normal platforming mechanics not as good as usual for normal jumping to encourage players to actually use the burrowing more?
I wouldn't say not as good.
Well, not as I mean, like, you don't need to be as. Let's rephrase what's written here. Instead of not as good, the player does not need to worry about being good at platforming.
Right.
Because they need to focus more on burrowing.
I think that we'll still be asking players to do some challenging platforming at the end of the day, but the way that it does work takes some of the pressure off of very specific timing and more about like where you're using the burrow to go, right? When you approach a pit, while you're in burrow, you'll automatically jump out of it when you hit the pit. So it's less about like testing whether the player can successfully hit the button in a very specific window, which doesn't seem that interesting. And it's way more about like trusting them to try and identify how to play the game really well and how to be strategic and how to move around in a way that they don't take damage from all the crazy hazards and enemies that are running around everywhere.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, but that was my poorly written question too, by the way. But yeah, I do love the auto jump at the edge of ledges while burrowing.
Glad to hear it.
I had a quick question. Why is the enemy damage meter at the bottom of the screen below your health instead of by the enemies in the game?
We thought about that, and we even at one point kind of mocked that up, what it would look like. But if you put a bunch of health bars above every enemy in the game, then it's a game where you're staring at a bunch of health bars all the time.
Yeah.
And that seemed less fun and less cool than putting it somewhere where you can glance at the information if you need it, but it's not there if you don't. It's also, I think, kind of interesting because it allows the health bar to be more of an element. If we have to have a bunch of these floating around on screen at all times, then they would have to be like pretty simple and pretty small. But the health bar for the player in this game is like a complex monstrosity, right? It has like a lot of intricacies and it has a lot of really weird and new mechanics involved. And by putting the enemy health bar at the bottom, we can potentially do some of those similar things, right? Maybe you'll find an enemy or a boss that like can heal themselves and generates like their own plasma meter, that yellow, right? Maybe there's an enemy with more than one spark slot, so if you die to them multiple times, they can hold more than one of your sparks, since you'd have to defeat them multiple times to get them all back, potentially. As well as, you know, some other health bar mechanics that we have implemented that I'm excited about, but I feel like I shouldn't talk about yet.
I like where this is going.
Yeah, by putting it in its own space, we can make it into a larger feature, I think, than it otherwise.
Quick, I'm not sure if we asked it, but what are your favorite games from the Game Boy Color era?
Oh man, obviously those top-down Zeldas are just ace. Link's Awakening DX was like one of my first games, and I loved it so much. I think that like Pokemon Gold and Silver are technical marvels, and maybe the best that series has like ever been. I really love those two games. I think there's a lot of really cool hidden gem type stuff in there. I'm sure you guys have checked out For the Frog, the Bell Tolls. I love that game so much, I think just because I'm a fan of that weird Tingle RPG, and it seems like they kind of share a lot of DNA. Yeah, there's just so much. The bite-sized stuff is great. How can you not mention Tetris, right?
Of course.
But one of the fun things about working on a game like this is that I feel really encouraged to like go back and play the entire backlog of everything on Game Boy, just so I can like absorb it into my brain. One of the first games that I like had to check out as soon as this idea was starting to crystallize was Mole Mania, obviously. Miyamoto designed game that's not a lot of people know about, with like burrowing mechanics in a really different kind of way, but seeing how all that worked was like really, really interesting to me.
Before we were talking about it, and I was mentioning how the Underlabs kind of reminded me of the hot spring in Mother 3, so also that, which some of our fans might like to hear.
Definitely. Mother 3 is like one of my favorite games ever. I played that fan translation the second it was released. I have so much respect for the Starmen.net community and all of those people now at Fangamer that worked on that incredible translation. I would hope that a lot of the charm of that game can get into Mina the Hollower, but that is a tall order. The writing and the world building of Mother 3 are just like so strong, and they're a tremendous influence, definitely.
Well, I think we're coming to the end here. Tris, any last questions you'd like to ask?
Well, earlier you guys were talking about all the different the items, for example, that you can have, the different power-ups. And you started talking a little bit about like some fun ideas that you guys have that you really excited to implement, but you were you were definitely trying to make sure not to say too much there. But is there any sort of hint or tease you can give us on ones we haven't seen yet?
New characters or mechanics or items? That what the question is?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited about a lot of let me think of my brain and try to pick one out. We have a new thing. It's a little bit in the trailer where like there's glass floors that you can burrow under, and since it's glass you can see her like digging through the ground, and that also means we can have level design that exists like under the glass and level design that exists over the glass, right? So in that shot in the trailer, right, there's a bunch of enemies on top of the glass and you have to fight them normally because you can't burrow into glass, right? Doesn't make no sense. So all of a sudden like your trusty burrow is kind of eliminated, and you have to like deal with the enemies in a much more challenging and different context. But then if you can go to the sides and get underneath the glass from the sides, right, then you can bait them around while being underneath the floor, so to speak. And yeah, we put that in a while ago, but for the trailer we like polished it all up. So now I'm like thinking about it, and I'm like, I want to make some levels with that stuff.
That sounds fun. Like not being invincible, burrowing all the time, or having to think more about it. Well, I guess finishing up here, Alec, is there any kind of final thoughts or things you'd like our audience to know before the end of our interview?
I just want to say I'm extremely grateful on behalf of everybody at Yacht Club for the tremendous response to the game so far. It really is. It's a crazy dream come true to be able to make this and have so many people be so excited about it. So to everyone who's backed the Kickstarter, thank you so much. And to those who haven't, thank you so much for checking out the game anyways.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's MinaTheHollower.com. Of course, there's more stretch goals being unlocked now, so there is more potential content to go into the game. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. And thank you so much, Alec, for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. This was a lot of fun.
Okay, and with that, guys, thanks so much for watching. For more potential interviews in the future, all things gaming and indie games, stay tuned to GameXplain. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.